Hi, my name is Nakisha Crawford. I'm going to be presenting on a guide to collecting effective research. Just a little bit about me. I have a BA and MA in English literature with my MA focusing on medieval lit. In essence, I've written a ton of research papers on feminism and monsters. So I kind of researched everything under the sun. The goal of this lesson is going to be to familiarize students with how to procure valid research when using library databases that is up to date, peer reviewed, and has a substantial body of information to use. This will also highlight the ASL's learning standards with a specific focus on two standards, which are to inquire and curate. The frameworks that we're going to be focusing on are inquiry, which means to begin to ask questions and think critically about something you may be interested in, and also to curate, which means to collect, organize, and share resources that are relevant to their interest and inquiries. With that being said, one of the things when you are conducting your research is obviously you're going to focus on your primary source and your secondary source. So the primary source is the main source where you're going to be forming your research question from, and then starting to find sources that help expand upon whatever that research question is that also mentions your primary source or is in tangent with your primary source. So that would be your secondary source, which would be, I have a video that explains what secondary sources are, so let me load it up. Sorry. Can you guys see it, the YouTube video?
Not yet. Oh, there you go.
Okay, cool. So this is the video that I chose.
Secondary sources describe, analyze, or interpret primary sources. A letter written by a Civil War soldier is a primary source, while a book written by a historian who uses the letter as evidence is a secondary source. An article from the Journal of the American Medical Association giving the results of an original study on new treatments for heart disease is a primary source, while a news report describing the importance of the study is a secondary source. Some types of sources can be either primary or secondary sources, depending on how the source is used. A book written by a historian would usually be considered a secondary source. However, if the book was written in the 1930s, and you are studying the 1930s, then the book could be considered a primary source for that period. To sum up, primary sources were created during the time period being studied. They consist of original, first-hand accounts or artifacts produced at that time. Secondary sources describe, analyze, and interpret primary sources.
Okay, so now that we know what a secondary source is, and we have more of like a clear definition, what would you say defines a good secondary source when you're beginning to search for it? And feel free to answer this question in the chat. Which for some reason is not showing for me anymore. Or you can unmute. Oh, I see the chat. Sorry. Yeah, books written later than the event are a good secondary source. Anyone else have any? Okay, so then we're gonna go and discuss what makes a good secondary source. Oral history's been passed down? Yes. So we're gonna go and start on the basics of like what basically makes a good secondary source when it comes to beginning your research paper, and then how to filter down in between those. So the three the three key goals for finding a good secondary source is making sure that first it is peer reviewed. that it's current, and that it has linked to it. So usually when you're doing your like undergraduate studies, you can kind of get away with kind of just using random secondary sources. But once you start going into your graduate studies, there's a very clear definition of what your professor expects from you. The first is that your source is going to be peer reviewed. The second is that it is up to date. So maybe within 10 to 20 years of being written within 10 to 20 years, nothing from like the 1800s, 1900s. And that it has linked to it, so that it's not like just this one paragraph or this one page resource with this one quote that you're basically going through and mining quotes from. So with that being said, I'm going to show you how to filter your secondary sources. The way to do that is to go through the databases that you are using, whatever database you're choosing to use, and we use the search functions there. So let me go to the EBSCOhost. So I'm going to use EBSCOhost because it's one of the main databases that people kind of get familiar with when they first begin their research. I had already started with a preliminary topic, which is Pride and Prejudice, saying if you were taking a literature class. So the left side is where we want to focus on, where you kind of refine your search results just to start getting the resources that you need. So the first thing you always want to do is, if you're to write a research paper, you want to focus on academic journals. You can also focus on books as well, biographies, dissertations, literary works, all of that's there. So for now, just to make this simple, I'm going to choose academic journals, which already is going to limit my search results to 3,000. And then I'm going to take it a step further and choose that on the left side as well, choose that the journals are going to be scholarly peer reviewed, which means that they have gone through some form of auditing. So you want to use peer reviewed text because that means that people in that field have gone through and gone over these journals, these articles, and they've deemed them to have enough credibility to be used as an academic form of study. When I limited the scholarly peer reviewed journals, you can see how that lowered down to 2,841 resources, which again, this is just a very broad search. So say if I added in like a secondary field like Mr. Darcy's Pride or his Prejudice, or anything that would kind of even go further into that discussion, it would kind of even lower the results down further. The second thing, which is very good to notice, is that I have articles from 1885 to 2021. Obviously, when you're writing a research paper, you kind of want to try to go into the most current forms of publication, just because ideas or theories might be outdated. Like say if you're doing psychoanalysis, you kind of want to go with the more recent ideas if you're going to write a paper. So you would slide the button over to about 1990, 2021. This is kind of also based on your professor's preference. I had a professor that would only let us use articles within 20 years, some with only in 10 years. And we had to make do with that and make sure that everything was up to what their standards were. The last thing is not actually going to be on the left side of your filter, but actually within your results. So you always want to make sure that the article, like I said before, is not like a paragraph or 1 to 2 pages. You want to make sure that there is body to what you're pulling your information from, that you're understanding the topic, and it's not just a short sentence that kind of hints at what you're speaking on. So you always want to look at the information for the articles. So this is this first article, The Role of Resilience in Ethnic Minority Adolescents. if you see the page number, you see page 507 to page 15. So it gives you about 8 pages. The next one has 17, the next one has 19. So you just kind of want to, once you find like specifically what you're looking for and you have all these results, you want to make sure that the articles you're choosing have a link to them. Some professors will mark you down or not count a resource if it's only like one page or a paragraph. So it's pretty good to know exactly what they're looking for, but also know that if they were to go through and completely go through your works cited page, that what you're presenting to them has a body if they were to check your resources. So again, you probably want to choose articles that have 10, 15, 17 pages, nothing that's really below 5. Any questions? Okay. With that being said, I did kind of create a quiz to kind of go over what I just spoke about. It's actually designed as a race. So I'm going to share the link in the chat and then we can start it once everyone signs in. Let me just go grab the link. Sorry, my laptop splits like all my screens into multiple things. So it's kind of hard for me to keep track of everything. So this is the link and this is the code to get into it. It's going to be on Menti. So I will go onto my version 2 and then I'll screen share from there as well. Sorry, give me 1 second. Can everyone see the, is everyone in? Okay, so
I'm not seeing it on my side. It says, oh, here it is. It just popped up. Sorry.
okay, cool.
Okay.
It's kind of cool on mine because I see everyone's little characters they chose. Okay, so we're gonna start. It's gonna be a countdown of 30 seconds for each question. So I'm gonna start it now, okay? What should be the first thing you check when searching for a secondary source? And is it showing up well for everyone? Thank you, Molly. Okay, awesome. If it's peer reviewed, yes, that's the first thing you would want to do just to make sure that you're not, you like find this perfect article that you feel like it's recent and it's long, then it's not peer reviewed. That'd be kind of upsetting. It's happened to me before. Okay. When using filters, as you add on filters, what should happen to your results? Awesome. Yes, they should decrease. I feel like if you're increasing numbers, that's probably means you're taking away filters on accident and not adding as you go. If you're writing a paper and your professor tells you to make sure that the research is current, what does that mean? Yes, they should be recent. Um, I once tried to get away with using a resource that was very, very old, and it did not work out well for me. Um, the next question. What is an acceptable link for a secondary source for a research paper? 5 pages up. Awesome. So thank you for participating. And wow, room 1. That's a cool little race. All right. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so the last thing that I just wanted to kind of gloss over as a way to expand upon your research was that you can also, when you find these peer-reviewed sources and you think that the article really resonates with what you're speaking about and that you're looking into, you can always check their Works Cited page to find resources as well, to see if the resources that they're listing kind of fit what suits your needs. I remember one of my last semesters for my master's, and I was really wanting to write about like sexuality and Beauty and the Beast type stories. And I only found like 2 really good articles, but then when I went through the Works Cited page, I was able to like expand the amount of sources that I could use and reference, and they were really great sources. So they helped me finish my paper as well. That's actually the wrong slide. So just to recap, the first 3 things that you just want to make sure whenever you start your initial research journey is to make sure that all the articles you're pulling are peer reviewed. Make sure that the research is current, and then make sure that it has linked to it. Is there any questions or any comments? Okay, so just before I finish, I did make a feedback form for everyone. And I also, I'll link it to the chat and you can save it and use it later. I made it to where the feedback questions are kind of what you needed to do to fulfill your final instruction requirements about observations. And I made it to where it could send it back to you. So I'll link it to the chat, and thank you for listening to my lesson.